Imagine D-Day, June 6, 1944. That roar of thousands of engines, the churn of the English Channel, this armada just vast enough to blot out the horizon. This wasn't just any day, it was the largest amphibious invasion in human history, a moment demanding peak human performance, unwavering courage, and absolute, almost superhuman focus from every single person there.
Absolutely. Total focus.
Now just take a breath. Imagine a single soldier wading onto those blood-soaked beaches of Normandy, not fueled by adrenaline and training, but disoriented, reality distorted by substances like MDMA or, psilocybin mushrooms.
It's a terrifying thought, almost unthinkable, really.
It is, isn't it? But this dark thought experiment, it really illuminates just how delicate that balance of human capability is when you're facing unimaginable chaos.
Yeah, it forces us to confront the absolute limits, the limits of human endurance, both mental and physical, under, well, probably the most extreme conditions you could possibly imagine.
Conditions where every millisecond counts.
Exactly. Every perception, every action, it's literally the difference between life and death.
And that's our mission today. We're going to embark on a deep dive into D-Day, MDMA, and shrooms. It's this fascinating, if pretty chilling report that explores the catastrophic hypothetical impact of a D-Day soldier ingesting these powerful substances.
Right.
Our goal is to meticulously unpack the psychopharmacological profiles, what these drugs actually do, MDMA and psilocybin. Then we'll overlay them onto that unique, brutal crucible of the D-Day combat environment. From there, we'll examine the immediate, almost certain consequences, and then we'll dare to consider the devastating long-term impacts, all while facing the, let's be honest, grim realities of 1944 medical care.
And it's important to stress, this isn't just about understanding the isolated effects of these drugs, like in a lab setting.
No.
It's about how they interact with that specific environment. An environment that would profoundly amplify their most debilitating aspects, creating a scenario of almost certain failure and frankly guaranteed catastrophe.
You might be wondering, and it's a fair question, why? Why even consider such a dark scenario? What's the point? Well, it offers this truly unique, almost microscopic lens. A way to understand human resilience, the astonishing limits of the human body and mind under extreme duress, and, the historical context of battlefield medicine back then.
It helps appreciate what was actually achieved that day.
Exactly. It's a way to appreciate the incredible, unmedicated, baseline human performance that was demanded that day, while also delivering some surprising, sobering facts about how easily that delicate balance can just be shattered. So, let's begin. Okay, let's really unpack the stage we're setting here. Operation Overlord. It wasn't just another battle. It was this massive logistical marvel, the largest amphibious invasion ever, and an undeniable pivotal moment in World War II.
Absolutely pivotal.
When you think about the planning, the sheer numbers, the coordination needed to pull something like this off, it's almost beyond comprehension.
It really is. And the success of D-Day, it wasn't born overnight, was it? It was the culmination of 2 intense years of meticulous planning, a massive buildup of forces, and just extensive, relentless training by both the U.S. and Great Britain.
2 years. Wow.
Yeah, it was an undertaking of truly staggering proportions. Try to picture this. On June 6, 1944, this armada, over 7,000 naval vessels, like a floating city, crossed the English Channel.
7,000.
Just to give you a sense of that scale, that included 4,000 landing craft alone, each one packed with nervous, determined men. And alongside them, 1,200 warships providing cover fire.
Incredible.
And this unprecedented naval force, it was supported by 822 aircraft darkening the skies. They deployed 23,400 airborne troops behind enemy lines first.
The paratroopers.
Right. And then followed by nearly 160,000 Allied troops landing on the beaches of Normandy. It was just an assembly of power and precision on a scale never before witnessed.
That's not a skirmish. That's a meticulously choreographed, high-stakes operation where every single soldier's role, no matter how seemingly small, was absolutely critical to the whole thing succeeding. The level of precision and coordination required from individuals, from units, from entire armies, it's genuinely unfathomable.
Precisely. And that sheer magnitude, it implied an unparalleled level of expected performance. Individual and collective performance. From every single person involved.
No room for error.
None. From the lowest-ranking private tasked with clearing a mine, to the squad leader directing fire, to the highest-ranking general coordinating entire flanks. Everyone had a specific, vital role.
Yeah.
And a failure in that role, it could have cascading, deadly consequences.
Right.
Any deviation from expected performance, particularly if it's due to impairment, wouldn't just jeopardize the individual soldier. It would create these significant ripple effects,
Yeah.
potentially compromising unit integrity, maybe allowing enemy counterattacks, and ultimately jeopardizing the broader mission objectives.
Yeah, you can see how that would happen.
Imagine just one person failing to clear a mine, or hesitating to return fire when their buddies are exposed, or just being unable to follow a critical command to advance or fall back. The immediate consequences could be devastating for an entire platoon. So the inherent crushing pressure to perform flawlessly, even before the direct combat began, right, before the first bullet was even fired, was immense.
Yeah.
This really highlights that D-Day was an environment where human performance was pushed to its absolute limits, where even the smallest impairment could have catastrophic consequences, because the entire operation literally depended on the collective, uncompromised functionality of hundreds of thousands of individuals working essentially as one.
Okay, so beyond the sheer mind-boggling scale, the environment itself, it was an overwhelming sensory assault. The report paints this vivid, frankly, nightmarish picture. Soldiers immersed in the gore and stench of war, the horrifying screams of the wounded and dying, stuff that would haunt them for life, and thick smoke from missiles and artillery obscuring visibility, turning the battlefield into this suffocating, disorienting landscape.
And the noise. The report says it was truly deafening.
Yeah.
A continuous concussive cacophony of naval bombardment, machine guns, mortar fire, small arms fire, grenades, motorized vehicles, aircraft, all at once.
Just constant.
Yeah, try to imagine that for a moment. The relentless, bone-shaking sounds of explosions literally shaking the ground beneath you. The constant rattle and whine of gunfire. The cries of agony from your comrades. All assaulting your ears without stopping, often for hours on end.
It's hard to even process that.
Exactly. This constant, high-intensity assault on all senses, it pushed the limits of human processing capacity. This extreme sensory overload, it directly compromises a soldier's ability to filter relevant information from the noise, to react appropriately to immediate threats, and just to maintain any semblance of mental clarity.
Yeah.
It creates this baseline of profound cognitive and emotional strain that, most of us can barely imagine in our daily lives.
Right.
So into this already overloaded, hyperstimulated system, introducing a powerful psychoactive substance wouldn't just add another variable. It would exponentially amplify the disorienting and debilitating effects.
Yeah.
It would lead to a rapid and profound breakdown of cognitive and emotional regulation, making any effective action virtually impossible.
It just shows how fragile that mental clarity is when pushed to the breaking point.
Completely.
And beyond the sensory stuff, there were the immediate and extreme physical demands. I mean, many soldiers, often carrying heavy equipment, were forced to swim miles to shore after their landing crafts were sunk.
Yeah, think about that. Expending enormous, light-sustaining energy before they even set foot on the beach. Arriving, soaking wet, exhausted, and immediately under fire.
Brutal.
Absolutely. Consider the Herculean efforts of individuals like U.S. Army Private Kenneth Moore and Private Edwin Doc Pepping stretcher bearers. They faced the arduous, brutal task of hauling severely wounded comrades under constant incoming fire.
Under fire.
Hauling people.
Yeah, that required immense physical strength, endurance, and unwavering determination in the most perilous conditions imaginable, often through freezing water and deep sand. Paratroopers, too, faced perilous jumps, often dropped at dangerously low altitudes, like 300 feet, instead of the planned 700 feet.
Way too low. And at high speeds, 165 mile per hour instead of 95 mile per hour. This frequently led to severe injuries just on landing, things like concussions, broken bones, cracked vertebrae, before they even engaged the enemy.
So they're injured before the fight even starts.
Exactly. And medics, themselves under fire, frequently lost vital supplies during their jumps or on the landing. They had to improvise critical life-saving procedures with whatever limited resources they had left. It just highlights the unpredictable and harsh nature of that environment.
Wow.
So these inherent immense physical stressors mean that any substance impairing motor skills, coordination, or increasing physiological strain, like causing hyperthermia, dehydration, or muscle cramping, would immediately render a soldier non-functional or fatally vulnerable.
No margin for error, physically either.
None. The physical rigor of D-Day implied that even subtle drug-induced physical impairment could be immediately catastrophic. It could lead to rapid incapacitation or death, irrespective of their psychological state. Survival depended on peak physical condition and endurance.
And then there's the profound psychological toll. Troops face this unremitting, constant, terrifying threat of injury and death. The horrific conditions actually caused some soldiers to just fall or freeze in place from sheer paralyzing terror. unable to move or react.
Complete overload.
Omaha Beach, in particular, was notorious for its intense German resistance. It resulted in over 10,300 Allied casualties on D-Day alone,
10,000.
with approximately 2,400 of those horrific losses just on Omaha Beach. That's a staggering number of lives lost or forever altered in a single day.
It is. But despite this overwhelming terror, it's fascinating to note that some medics reported they didn't have time to be afraid.
Really?
Yeah, indicating this profound, almost automatic task-driven suppression of fear in the face of overwhelming immediate duties. It illustrates the incredible spectrum of human psychological responses to extreme stress, right? Where some individuals show remarkable resilience and a task-focused coping mechanism that overrides that primal fear. Now, imagine a drug that deliberately alters fear perception or emotional state, like MDMA, or one that induces profound dissociation, like psilocybin. Such a substance would fundamentally disrupt these natural, albeit extreme, coping mechanisms. Instead of enhancing performance, it would likely lead to wildly maladaptive responses, utter panic maybe, or a complete inability to function.
It shatters that balance.
Exactly. That delicate balance of psychological responses required for combat, that finely tuned mental state, would be shattered by these substances. Which raises the question, what happens when you introduce a profound disruption to that already fragile balance, when a soldier's mind is already pushed to its absolute breaking point?
Yeah.
The soldier would lose that crucial ability to appropriately assess and respond to threats. They'd become not only a danger to themselves, but a grave risk to their entire unit.
Okay, so now that we've painted that stark, brutal picture of D-Day, let's talk about the substances themselves. Let's begin with MDMA. The report describes it as both a stimulant and a psychedelic.
Right, a bit of both.
It's known to produce an energizing effect, distortions in time and perception, and an enhanced enjoyment of tactile experiences. It also famously reduces inhibitions and promotes feelings of euphoria, closeness, empathy, and sexuality.
Which sounds like a lot of things that are profoundly, dangerously out of place on a battlefield.
Exactly.
Indeed. MDMA primarily affects brain cells that use serotonin. Now, serotonin is a crucial neurotransmitter for regulating mood, aggression, sexual activity, sleep, pain sensitivity.
Key functions.
Absolutely key functions. So when MDMA floods the brain with serotonin and also dopamine and norepinephrine, it's not just about a temporary mood boost. Think about it. These are the very neurotransmitters governing your fight or flight response, your aggression, your ability to focus under pressure, your perception of pain.
Okay.
So MDMA essentially throws this chaotic wrench into the brain's core combat operating system.
Wow.
However, the unwanted psychological effects are significant too. Confusion, anxiety, sometimes acute depression, profound paranoia, severe sleep problems, and intense drug craving.
Not good.
Not good at all. And these typically manifest pretty quickly within 30 to 45 minutes of taking it and can persist for 4 to 6 hours. Though some disturbances, particularly emotional and cognitive ones, might linger for weeks.
Weeks.
Yeah. And what's even more concerning for any long-term prospects, chronic use is associated with long-term problems with memory and learning, and potential damage to the serotonin system itself, which ironically diminishes the very ability to feel pleasure.
So it ruins the thing it initially provides.
A cruel long-term irony, yes, for a drug that initially provides euphoria.
So if it promotes feelings of closeness and empathy, some might even think, wouldn't a dose of empathy actually be a good thing? Maybe for unit cohesion, or even reducing the psychological burden of combat? How does the report tackle that potentially counterintuitive idea?
That's a perceptive question. And what's truly fascinating here is that those effects are not only unhelpful, but fundamentally counterproductive, if not outright catastrophic in combat. Well, soldiers are rigorously trained to overcome natural inhibitions against violence, right? To suppress fear and, to some extent, to dehumanize the enemy, to engage effectively in lethal combat.
Right, that's the training.
Introducing increased empathy towards strangers, or worse, the enemy, would directly undermine that psychological conditioning necessary for lethal engagement.
Okay, I see.
This could lead to crippling hesitation at a critical moment, intense moral distress, and inability to engage lethal force when lives depend on it, or even profoundly inappropriate attempts at connection or communication in a hostile environment, which would be truly bizarre and dangerously exposing.
Yeah, that would be bad.
This profound mismatch between the drug's primary psychological effects and the brutal necessities of a battlefield wouldn't only endanger the individual soldier by making them less effective or more vulnerable, it would also expose their unit. Their hesitation or impaired aggression could expose their comrades to severe danger and compromise the mission.
And physically, what are the acute risks? The ones that would manifest almost immediately on a beach like Omaha, where the physical demands are so extreme.
Physiologically, MDMA users experience many effects startlingly similar to other powerful stimulants like cocaine and amphetamines.
Like what?
Well, increased motor activity and alertness, yes, but also a dangerous and rapid rise in heart rate and blood pressure. It pushes the cardiovascular system to its limits.
Okay.
Common unwanted physical effects include intense muscle tension, uncontrollable tremors, involuntary teeth clenching, which users often call jawing, severe muscle cramps that can just lock up limbs, nausea, sudden faintness, chills, profuse uncontrollable sweating, and blurred vision.
Not ideal for aiming a rifle.
Definitely not.
The critical risk highlighted in the report, though, is severe dehydration, especially with physical exertion and potentially hot conditions. This seems like an almost guaranteed death sentence on D-Day, given the immense physical demands in the summer heat of June.
It absolutely is. And it's a critical, often overlooked danger of MDMA. It dangerously interferes with the body's natural ability to regulate temperature. It leads to hyperthermia,
Which is?
an uncontrolled and dangerous rise in core body temperature. This, in turn, can quickly lead to cardiovascular collapse or significant dehydration, all of which are potentially fatal conditions.
Right.
Now, the D-Day environment involved immense, continuous physical exertion, swimming miles under fire, hauling heavy equipment, running across open beaches, navigating treacherous terrain.
Yeah.
And it happened in June, which could involve warm or even stifling hot conditions. Combat itself would further elevate physiological demands through adrenaline and sustained effort.
It's a perfect storm.
Exactly. This synergistic combination of MDMA's thermoregulatory disruption, the extreme physical demands, and the inherent stress of combat would rapidly and inevitably lead to hyperthermia, severe dehydration, debilitating muscle cramping, and ultimately catastrophic cardiovascular collapse. These are immediate, life-threatening physiological conditions. They can quickly result in liver, kidney, or heart failure, and ultimately death. Even if a soldier could somehow miraculously navigate the psychological distortions induced by MDMA, their body would swiftly and inevitably succumb to the overwhelming physiological stress.
So the body gives out first, basically.
It makes physiological collapse a more immediate and certain outcome than the psychological effects alone, rendering any sustained combat role utterly impossible. The body would simply give out.
Okay. Now, let's turn our attention to psilocybin, or magic mushrooms. The report notes it acutely evokes profound mystical-type experiences, altering self-consciousness, mood, personality, and critically sensory and reality perception. It can induce euphoria, profound hallucinations, a sense of dissociation from reality, and altered cognitive states. It sounds like a complete and utter disengagement from reality, which is exactly what you don't want on the battlefield.
Precisely. And while psilocybin has been noted to enhance emotional empathy, it's crucial to understand it doesn't significantly alter cognitive empathy or social cognition. Those are vital for understanding others' intentions in a combat scenario.
Okay.
More importantly, for our scenario, cognitive flexibility and creative cognition are noted to initially decline in the acute phase, meaning the very mental agility needed for combat would be diminished right when you need it most.
That's critical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Crucially, there is consistent acute impairment of attention. That includes sustained attention, the ability to focus for prolonged periods, visual attention, and attentional tracking.
So you can't focus, can't see properly.
Exactly. This leads to longer reaction times and significantly reduced performance in a wide range of cognitive tasks, as well as low response inhibition, meaning an inability to control impulsive actions.
So reacting slowly and impulsively, bad combo.
A terrible combination in combat.
Yeah.
It means a soldier would struggle immensely to filter out irrelevant information, focus on immediate threats, and respond appropriately to the rapidly unfolding chaos.
The report heavily emphasizes that the psilocybin experience is deeply shaped by both set and setting. This feels critically important for a D-Day scenario where the setting is literally hell on earth and the set would be one of terror, presumably.
It is absolutely paramount. Set, as you said, refers to the individual's internal psychological state, their pre-existing fears, anxieties, their ingrained determination, their sense of duty, their primal survival instinct. Setting is the external environment.
And D-Day's setting.
D-Day represents arguably the most extreme, chaotic, terrifying, and overwhelming setting imaginable. Coupled with the soldier's probable mindset of intense fear, duty, and sheer terror, this profoundly hostile and stressful setting would almost certainly lead to what's commonly known as a bad trip, a nightmare scenario.
Not mystical insights, then.
Definitely not. Instead of mystical insights or therapeutic breakthroughs often reported in controlled clinical settings, the soldier would likely experience amplified paranoia, intense crippling terror, severe disorientation, and profoundly disturbing vivid hallucinations.
Turning the battlefield into a personal nightmare.
Exactly. Effectively turning the actual battlefield into a personalized psychological nightmare, one from which there is no escape. The screams of the wounded and dying we discussed earlier, they'd become horrifying, inescapable auditory hallucinations, maybe morphing into demonic voices or other terrifying sounds.
Oh, God.
The gore and stench of war would become overwhelmingly repulsive, or maybe even take on grotesque, impossible forms in their perception. The D-Day environment is the absolute antithesis of a therapeutic or controlled setting for psychedelic use.
Right.
The set and setting principle dictates that psilocybin would not only fail to enhance performance, but would actively induce severe psychological distress and immediate complete incapacitation. It would make the soldier a non-combatant at best, and a dangerous liability to themselves and others at worst.
So while psilocybin is generally considered physiologically safe in controlled settings, what about in combat, where physiological safety means nothing if you're mentally incapacitated and unable to move or defend yourself?
That's a vital, critical distinction, and a crucial misunderstanding of the term safe in this context. After oral administration, psilocybin's effects typically appear within 30 to 60 minutes, peak at 90 to 180 minutes, and can last for up to 6 hours.
A long time during an assault.
A critical and prolonged window during an active assault, yes. While generally considered physiologically safe and controlled, therapeutic settings, meaning it's not acutely toxic to organs, the acute cognitive impairments, particularly those related to attention, reaction time, and inhibition, would have severe, deadly negative impacts in any combat situation, let alone the sheer chaos of D-Day.
So the brain effects are the real danger here.
Absolutely. The research explicitly states these acute impairments would mean a soldier's inability to maintain situational awareness, critically hindered reaction time, slower and less accurate decision-making, profound difficulty with target acquisition and engagement, and severely compromised self-preservation instincts.
Basically unable to function as a soldier.
Completely. In a combat zone where milliseconds literally mean the difference between life and death, where quick thinking and immediate reactions are paramount, impaired attention and prolonged reaction time are direct, inevitable pathways to severe injury or fatality.
Yeah.
The inability to quickly process incoming threats, identify and engage targets, or comprehend and execute rapid commands would render a soldier an immediate liability and an almost certain casualty. This isn't a subtle effect. It's a direct and profound functional impairment that negates the very skills and cognitive faculties required for survival and effectiveness in high-intensity combat.
Okay, let's take these very real, very debilitating effects and put them directly into the D-Day boots of a soldier. First, a soldier who has somehow ingested MDMA. How would MDMA specifically impact their situational awareness, their fear perception, and their decision-making in the terrifying chaos of June 6, 1944?
Right. So a soldier under the influence of MDMA would experience distortions in time and perception so severe that minutes could feel like hours or vice versa, and a fundamental altered sense of reality.
So they wouldn't know what's really happening.
Pretty much. This would catastrophically compromise their ability to accurately perceive the chaotic battlefield around them, to track rapidly moving enemy movements, identify immediate life-threatening dangers, or even just comprehend the rapidly evolving tactical situation. Imagine trying to make sense of that deafening noise and the smoke from missiles and artillery when your perception of what's real and what's distorted is already fundamentally skewed.
Impossible.
And the confusion and profound paranoia, which can occur within minutes and last for hours or even weeks, would further degrade their ability to process real-time information. It would make them utterly incapable of functioning as a soldier. They might perceive non-existent threats, or conversely fail to recognize real ones.
The report mentions MDMA reduces inhibitions and alters fear perception. So what about that idea of false courage? Could it make a soldier more fearless, maybe pushing them forward into the fray with a reckless abandon that might actually achieve something? Seems unlikely, but...
It's superficially plausible, maybe. But while a reduction in fear might seem advantageous in combat, MDMA's mechanism isn't true courage. True courage is the profound ability to act decisively and effectively despite fear.
Right.
Instead, MDMA offers an altered perception of reality, profoundly reduced inhibition, and this surge of euphoria that disconnects the individual from consequences.
So not courage, just recklessness.
Exactly. This would inevitably lead to a soldier engaging in profoundly reckless, suicidal actions that completely disregard mortal danger. Imagine them just standing up in the open under heavy machine gun fire,
Oh no.
or attempting to approach enemy lines without any cover, or failing to retreat when their unit is being decimated. Such behavior would not only guarantee their own swift death,
But endanger everyone else.
right, it would also immediately draw concentrated enemy fire, revealing their unit's position and dangerously exposing their comrades, turning them into targets. This scenario highlights that the drug wouldn't create a more effective soldier. It would create an immediate tragic casualty and a severe, life-threatening liability to their unit.
So false courage is just deadly.
It's merely a prelude to rapid incapacitation or death, making any combat role impossible and potentially jeopardizing the lives of everyone in their immediate vicinity.
And physically, you mentioned it sounds even worse. The muscle tension, tremors, teeth coiting, severe dehydration. On a day involving swimming through frigid water, running through sand, hauling heavy gear. This combination sounds not just debilitating, but truly fatal.
It absolutely is. And this is probably the most certain and immediate outcome. Beyond the severe perceptual distortions, the confusion, the heightened impulsiveness, which leads to critically impaired decision-making.
Like making dangerous choices without thinking.
Exactly. The report says they might make dangerous decisions without concern that these could lead to negative consequences, which is the polar opposite of the rapid, precise, life or death decisions needed on D-Day.
Right.
But the physical side is even more direct and unavoidable. The extreme physical demands of D-Day, sustained exertion, swimming miles fully loaded, hauling equipment, and wounded comrades through treacherous terrain combined with MDMA's severe physiological effects.
The hyperthermia, dehydration.
Uncontrolled hyperthermia, severe dehydration, dangerously increased heart rate and blood pressure, severe muscle cramps that would immobilize limbs. It creates a perfect, fatal storm. The body's core systems would simply fail under the combined stress.
Total system failure.
Pretty much. Extreme physical exertion combined with impaired thermoregulation, severe fluid loss, and cardiovascular strain would inevitably lead to hyperthermic shock, multi-organ failure, and rapid death.
So again, even if they somehow kept their head straight.
Even if they could mentally navigate the perceptual distortions and confusion, their body would quickly succumb to the overwhelming physiological stress. This makes physiological collapse a more immediate and certain outcome than the psychological effects alone, rendering any combat role completely impossible and ensuring their demise.
Okay. Now, for psilocybin, how would hallucinations and altered reality perception play out in the chaos of Omaha Beach, where every shadow could be an enemy, every distant shout a new threat, and the very ground beneath your feet is a death trap?
Right. Psilocybin causes alterations in sensory and reality perception, so profound that it can completely rewrite what a person experiences, and it can induce profound hallucinations.
Okay.
In the hyper-chaotic and lethal environment of D-Day, this would mean a soldier might perceive non-existent enemy combatants lurking in the smoke or amongst the wreckage. They might misinterpret friendly forces or even civilians as immediate threats, or just be completely unable to distinguish between real dangers like incoming fire or an actual enemy position and drug-induced delusion.
It's terrifying.
And the deafening noise of battle, the screams, the explosions, and the smoke from missiles and artillery could be profoundly distorted and amplified, leading to terrifying and utterly disorienting sensory experiences that would completely overwhelm any capacity for rational thought or action.
Like,
Imagine the sand writhing like snakes, maybe, or the distant shouts of commanders morphing into monstrous taunting voices. It would be a living hell.
the report stresses the set and setting principle here, and you've highlighted its importance. But what specifically would happen in such a profoundly hostile setting? How would the chaos of D-Day manifest in a bad trip?
Well, this principle is, as we discussed, critically important. The D-Day environment is inherently terrifying, utterly chaotic, and intensely threatening. It's the absolute antithesis of a controlled, calming therapeutic setting.
Right.
Psilocybin's effects on reality perception and its hallucinogenic potential would be drastically amplified by this hostile setting, virtually guaranteeing a profoundly negative, terrifying, and incapacitating experience.
So the environment makes the drug effects worse.
Exponentially worse. The screams of the wounded and dying and gore and stench of war would likely transform into horrifying, inescapable auditory and visual hallucinations, pushing the soldier into an acute psychotic state.
Oh, wow.
The soldier wouldn't be fighting the enemy anymore. They'd be battling their own mind, trapped in a personal hell, rendering them entirely useless and a likely immediate casualty.
And dangerous to others, too.
Absolutely. Their erratic and unpredictable behavior, maybe running into open fire, or screaming incoherently, or cowering in place, or even trying to interact with their hallucinations, could also endanger comrades. It could lead to friendly fire incidents or draw unwanted enemy attention to their position, further compounding the disaster for their unit.
And what about the impact on their ability to pay attention, think, and react? You said combat demands split-second decisions and unwavering focus, something psilocybin fundamentally undermines.
Exactly. Psilocybin acutely impairs attention. That includes sustained attention, keeping focus, visual attention scanning and detecting threats, and attentional tracking following moving targets.
So basically everything you need to do in a fight.
Pretty much. It leads to longer reaction times and significantly reduced performance in all cognitive tasks. This would directly translate to a soldier's inability to maintain vigilance, to detect rapidly moving threats on the battlefield, or to react quickly to incoming fire, sudden enemy appearances, or critical commands from superiors.
And you mentioned cognitive flexibility declines too.
Yes, crucially, cognitive flexibility and creative cognition are noted to initially decline. This means a soldier would struggle immensely to adapt to unforeseen circumstances, to problem solve under extreme pressure, or to make rapid tactical adjustments.
Not good when plans go wrong, which they always do.
Exactly. The available information explicitly states these impairments would lead to slower and less accurate decision-making and profound difficulty with target acquisition and engagement.
So they can't think straight, can't aim straight.
In essence, yes. Combat operations, especially in amphibious assault like D-Day, demand peak cognitive function. Rapid information processing, sustained attention to multiple stimuli, immediate, accurate decision-making under chaotic conditions. Psilocybin's acute impairment of attention, prolonged reaction times, and initial decline in cognitive flexibility directly undermine these critical faculties.
Making survival almost impossible.
The soldier would effectively be cognitively paralyzed or severely handicapped in a situation demanding extreme mental agility and rapid response, making their survival virtually impossible. Their inability to perform even basic combat functions would also make them a severe liability to their unit.
What about their emotional state and social cohesion within a unit? Soldiers rely on each other implicitly, right? On trust, clear communication, the ability to act as one. How would psilocybin disrupt that vital bond?
Well, psilocybin can induce euphoria, but it also significantly alters mood and self-consciousness. While it enhances emotional empathy, this could be profoundly detrimental in combat, similar to MDMA.
How so?
By blurring the lines between friend and foe, inducing inappropriate emotional responses like profound sadness, uncontrollable laughter, overwhelming fear, or even a disturbing emotional detachment from the grim reality of the situation, none of which are helpful.
No.
The sense of oneness and selflessness often associated with psilocybin could paradoxically undermine unit cohesion if it leads to a loss of individual responsibility, an inability to distinguish unit members from the broader environment, or a complete breakdown in the recognition of rank and command structure.
So they might not follow orders.
Or even understand them.
Mm-hmm.
Effective communication and coordinated action, which were absolutely vital for the success of D-Day, would be severely disrupted if a soldier is experiencing dissociation, altered social perception, or a profound inability to process verbal commands.
Military operations depend on that structure.
Absolutely. Particularly an invasion of the scale of D-Day. It depends on strict adherence to command structures, clear and concise communication, and absolute trust and cohesion within a unit. Psilocybin's effects on reality perception, dissociation, and potentially inappropriate emotional responses could lead to a soldier failing to recognize or obey commands, perceiving their comrades in distorted or threatening ways, or acting independently based on hallucinatory input rather than tactical necessity.
Leading to chaos.
Total chaos, altered social perception, dissociation, impaired communication, unpredictable emotional responses. It would result in a breakdown of unit discipline, an inability to follow orders, potential for friendly fire incidents, and abandonment of critical positions. The impact of a psilocybin-intoxicated soldier would extend far beyond their individual incapacitation. It would jeopardize the lives of their comrades and potentially compromise the success of their immediate tactical objective. The soldier becomes a severe liability, undermining the collective effort of the entire fighting force.
So we've laid out this horrifying scenario. Given these profound and utterly debilitating effects, what does this all mean for survival? What's the likelihood of a soldier under the influence of MDMA or psilocybin actually surviving the immediate D-Day assault? Sounds like an almost impossible feat.
Yeah, the probability of survival for a soldier under the influence of either substance on D-Day would be exceptionally low, approaching zero, really.
0. Wow.
Such an individual would almost certainly become an immediate casualty due to their profound inability to defend themselves, to follow orders, to navigate the treacherous, deadly environment, or just to distinguish friend from foe amidst the chaos. Their actions would be erratic, unpredictable, and ultimately self-destructive in that intensely hostile environment. It would lead to a swift demise.
They'd just become another casualty very quickly.
Exactly. Likely very quickly, without contributing anything positive to the mission.
And the ripple effect on their unit. Because this isn't just about one soldier's fate, is it? It's about the entire fighting force, the integrity of that well-oiled machine.
You're right to emphasize the ripple effect. This incapacitated individual would also pose a severe, often immediate liability to their unit.
How?
Their erratic behavior may be suddenly standing up, screaming, or failing to maintain cover, or their inability to return fire effectively could disrupt coordinated action. It could draw concentrated enemy fire onto their position, or even cause friendly fire incidents due to their impaired perception and judgment.
A disaster for everyone around them.
Absolutely. The success of the D-Day operation was critically dependent on precise coordination, disciplined action, and strong unit cohesion. In a combat scenario as intense, complex, and unforgiving as D-Day, every single soldier must be a fully functional, contributing member of their unit.
No weaklings allowed.
Essentially, no.
Yeah.
A soldier under the influence of these drugs would be utterly unable to perform their duties. They'd become dead weight at bag, requiring diversion of critically scarce resources like medics and stretcher bearers.
Who are already stretched thin.
Exactly. Stretched to their absolute limits, treating conventional injuries. At worst, they would be a dangerous liability, actively endangering their comrades' lives.
So it weakens a whole unit.
This incapacitation, combined with the diversion of precious resources and the direct danger posed to the unit, would inevitably lead to increased casualties for that unit, reduced combat effectiveness, and potential failure of immediate tactical objectives. It really underscores that the impact of drug intoxication extends far beyond the individual. It highlights the critical importance of unimpaired performance and collective functionality in a large-scale military operation.
One person's choice or tragic circumstance could have severe negative ripple effects across their immediate fighting force.
Precisely.
Let's consider the medical side of things in 1944. The U.S. Army's medical service had achieved full development in organization and technique by fall 1944. They had robust systems for triage, aid stations, hospitals.
Pretty sophisticated for the time.
They had widespread use of sulfa powder and penicillin, estimated to have saved a staggering 15% of Allied casualties. That's huge.
Incredible numbers, yeah. Roughly 2.4 million troops saved by those antibiotics.
And they had advanced blood transfusions, plasma storage. Morphine was a standard pain management tool, although they recognized overdose risks and had treatments. So they were quite advanced for their time, certainly capable of handling combat injuries, right?
They were remarkably advanced for conventional physical injuries. Bullet wounds, shrapnel, broken bones, and infectious diseases. Absolutely, no question. However, despite these impressive advancements, military medicine in 1944 primarily focused on visible physical injuries, common infectious diseases, and recognized psychological conditions like combat neuroses or combat exhaustion, which were understood through the lens of the time.
Okay.
The critical point is there was simply no established understanding, diagnostic framework, or clinical experience with MDMA or psilocybin intoxication. These substances were not widely known or studied outside of very limited scientific circles back then, let alone recognized as drugs of abuse or clinical concern in any military or civilian context.
So they wouldn't even know what they were looking at.
Exactly. Soldiers presenting with acute, profound hallucinations, extreme confusion, severe paranoia, or hyperthermia without obvious physical trauma would likely be completely misdiagnosed, maybe a severe combat exhaustion, or an acute psychotic break unrelated to substance use, or even a rare severe head injury, if they were even triaged for treatment at all amidst the overwhelming physical casualties. Medical personnel would be utterly bewildered.
So if a medic saw a soldier like this, disoriented, hallucinating, maybe collapsing from heat stroke, they wouldn't know what to do beyond basic first aid. They wouldn't have a clue what they were actually dealing with.
Precisely. And their interventions might even make things worse.
How so?
Interventions for combat exhaustion at the time typically involved rest, hot meals, and sedatives like sodium metal. Now, these interventions, while well-intentioned for known conditions, would be wholly inadequate and, in many cases, potentially dangerous for acute drug-induced psychosis or severe physiological complications like uncontrolled hyperthermia, cardiovascular collapse, and organ failure from MDMA.
So the standard treatment could be harmful.
Potentially, yes. The specific antidotes, pharmacological interventions, or supportive care necessary for managing these substances were entirely unknown in 1944. The science simply wasn't there yet.
Right.
Furthermore, the medical system was already operating under immense crushing strain. Completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of physical casualties, over 10,000 wounded on D-Day alone, and a staggering 124,000 American casualties between June and August 1944.
Unbelievable numbers.
Diversion of critically scarce medical resources, precious personnel, limited supplies, desperately needed bed space to a soldier suffering from an undiagnosed and untreatable drug overdose or psychosis would have been impractical and highly unlikely, especially in forward aid stations or under active combat conditions where every second counted.
And what about mental health support? Was there any infrastructure for psychiatric care for such extreme, novel cases?
Well, WWII military psychiatry struggled significantly with screening, diagnosis, and treatment of any mental health issues, let alone bizarre drug-induced states. Psychiatric symptoms were often labeled, unfortunately, as a lack of moral fiber or even cowardice, carrying a heavy, devastating stigma for the soldier involved.
That's terrible.
It was. There was a documented lack of planning, preparation, and direction regarding large-scale psychiatric disorders, even conventional combat stress. The primary objective of psychiatric services was largely to return soldiers to duty as quickly as possible, not to manage complex, novel, drug-induced states that would be completely alien to their understanding.
So no real help there either.
Essentially, no. While 1944 military medicine was remarkably advanced for its time in treating physical trauma and infectious diseases, it operated entirely within the scientific and pharmacological understanding of its era. Consequently, medical personnel would possess no knowledge to diagnose, understand the underlying pathophysiology, or effectively treat such intoxications.
They were medically blind to it.
Completely. The profound lack of medical knowledge regarding these specific substances, coupled with a complete absence of targeted treatments, the overwhelming burden of physical casualties, and a prevailing limited, often stigmatizing view of psychiatric issues, would lead to near-certain death or severe, untreatable incapacitation for a soldier suffering from MDMA or psilocybin effects. The soldier would essentially be beyond the help of contemporary medicine. It highlights a profound historical context where the hypothetical scenario isn't just about the inherent dangers of the drug effects themselves, but about their interaction with a specific, severely limited medical reality.
A reality where the medical system, despite its best efforts for conventional injuries, would be utterly incapable of providing meaningful intervention for these drug-induced states.
Precisely. They'd be on their own, medically speaking.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and tragically bleak. Even in the highly improbable, almost miraculous event of survival through that immediate D-Day hell, what would be the long-term cost for a soldier who ingested these substances? It sounds like a compounding of horrors, a living nightmare that extends far beyond the battlefield itself.
Absolutely. And that's a crucial part of this thought experiment. For MDMA, chronic use is known to cause severe damage to the serotonin system in the brain. This leads to profound long-term memory and learning problems.
Lasting damage.
Lasting, potentially irreversible damage. And as we mentioned, it paradoxically reduces a person's ability to feel pleasure, leaving them in this state of anhedonia, unable to experience joy from things they used to love.
That's awful.
It is. Persistent anxiety, debilitating depression, crippling impulsiveness, and chronic hostility are documented side effects that can last for weeks, months, or even longer after use. And the potential for neurotoxicity, meaning direct, irreversible damage to the brain cells themselves, is a significant, terrifying concern. Imagine a veteran trying to rebuild their life with these fundamental brain functions compromised.
Unimaginable. And psilocybin? Would the psychological trauma be amplified even further by the nature of that bad trip in combat?
Precisely. While research on the long-term effects of psilocybin in healthy individuals is more limited than for MDMA, the profound psychological distress of a bad trip, experienced in the extreme, terrifying combat setting of D-Day, would almost certainly lead to severe and lasting psychiatric sequelae.
Like what?
This would include chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, but an unimaginable intensity, far beyond what even typical combat veterans experience. They would likely suffer from severe anxiety disorders, paralyzing panic attacks, or even persistent hallucinogen perception disorder, HPTD. That's where they could re-experience elements of the drug trip. The horrifying hallucinations, the distorted sounds, the feeling of terror weeks, months, or even years later, long after the drug has left their system. It blurs the lines between past trauma and present reality.
So the trip never really ends.
In a sense, yes. It could keep coming back.
So it's not just the immediate danger of death or incapacitation, but a potential lifetime of profound, unique, and likely untreatable suffering.
You've hit on the core of the tragedy there.
Yeah.
In the vanishingly small chance of survival, the soldier would face this compounding of severe, persistent psychological, neurological, and potentially physical impairments that would make a normal life impossible.
Right.
Both MDMA and psilocybin have documented long-term psychological and neurological effects. Memory impairment, chronic anxiety, depression, potential neurotoxicity. Now, superimpose those drug-induced pathologies onto the profound, life-altering psychological and physical trauma of D-Day combat itself.
A double whammy.
A devastating double whammy. This would create a unique and likely unprecedented spectrum of psychiatric and cognitive disorders that would render them utterly disabled. The 1944 military medical system, as we discussed, was already struggling immensely to manage combat exhaustion and had a limited, often stigmatizing understanding of even conventional psychiatric conditions.
So they wouldn't know how to treat this complex mix.
Not at all. Drug-induced neurotoxicity and psychological disruption, combined with severe combat trauma and inadequate historical medical and psychiatric care, would result in chronic, debilitating mental and physical health issues. It would render the survivor permanently impaired and likely institutionalized or severely marginalized in society.
Wow.
It paints a grim picture, not just of immediate death, but a potential for a living nightmare that would last for the rest of their days. This hypothetical highlights the irreversible and compounding damage such a combination would inflict, far beyond the scope of 1944 medical understanding or capability. It would lead to a life of profound suffering and disability.
This deep dive into such a dark hypothetical, it truly underscores how fundamentally antithetical the effects of MDMA and psilocybin are to the precise, demanding requirements of high-intensity, coordinated combat. There's just no positive scenario here, is there? Only degrees of catastrophe.
Indeed, none whatsoever. The set and setting of D-Day, characterized by that overwhelming sensory input, the extreme physical demands, unparalleled psychological stress, and the immediate threat of death would act as a powerful, devastating amplifier for the negative and debilitating aspects of both drugs.
Right.
It would virtually guarantee a profoundly negative experience or rapid physiological collapse.
Right.
The environment itself would turn the drugs into potent poisons in that context.
And the medical and psychiatric capabilities of 1944, despite being impressive for conventional injuries, were utterly unprepared for managing drug-induced psychoses or the severe physiological complications from these substances. It was a complete medical blind spot, wasn't it? Leaving basically no hope for effective intervention.
Absolutely. This profound medical blind spot would leave any affected soldier entirely without effective treatment, drastically reducing their already minuscule chance of survival. And for those who, against all odds, might survive the initial assault, it would lead to severe, compounding, and likely untreatable long-term psychological and neurological damage, condemning them to a lifetime of profound impairment.
Ultimately, this dark thought experiment, it isn't just about drugs or war, is it? It feels like it's a stark mirror reflecting the breathtaking fragility of our peak human capability.
That's a good way to put it.
Revealing that true resilience often lies not in overcoming fear with artificial bravery or a distorted mind, but in the unmedicated, unwavering focus and collective effort demanded by unimaginable adversity.
Yeah.
It makes you truly appreciate the extraordinary baseline of human performance and what it truly means to be ready for the impossible, doesn't it?
It really does. It puts the achievements of that day by ordinary people under extraordinary pressure into a very sharp perspective.